Here's something that honestly bothers me, and I think it should bother you too. The world is traveling more than ever right now. Record demand, packed planes, hotels booked months out, the strongest travel appetite we've seen in years. So why are some of America's most famous airports getting quieter? Not abandoned, not collapsing. The lights are on, the staff is there, the gates are still turning over flights. But the energy is different. That old feeling, like the whole world was passing through one building, has been fading in a way that's slow enough to ignore, but loud enough to show up in the numbers. And the numbers are the part you can't explain away. Las Vegas international arrivals dropping nearly 20% in a single month. Certain inbound flows from parts of Southeast Asia down by something close to 80%. Tourism and travel support roughly 18 million jobs in the United States. And most of the people whose livelihoods depend on that system have no idea what's quietly building underneath it. Because here's what makes this genuinely alarming. The world didn't stop traveling. It just stopped choosing America the way it used to. That's the shift. Not people aren't going anywhere, but people are going elsewhere. And once you understand why, you'll start noticing it in a way you can't unsee. Empty departure lounges, shorter immigration lines, fewer accents in places that used to feel global by default. There are 10 specific airports where this is showing up, and each one tells a different slice of the same story. By the time we get through them, you'll understand what most people haven't connected yet, and you won't look at a quiet terminal the same way again. And I want to start with one that really shouldn't be on this list at all, because it's basically engineered to be busy. Orlando. Think about Orlando for a second. Theme parks, sunshine, the most manufactured leisure ecosystem on the planet. Millions of families around the world can point to it on a map and say, that's the one. Orlando wasn't just built to attract tourists. It was designed around a single assumption. The world will keep showing up. Every shuttle route, every resort tower, every restaurant within 10 miles of the parks. Everything is built around volume. For decades, that assumption held. An international family landing at Orlando International wasn't just passengers arriving. It was an economic event. They don't come for a long weekend. They come for 7 to 10 days. They rent a car, they book a resort, they eat out 3 times a day, they buy tickets, they buy merchandise, they tip at dozens of places, they spill money into every corner of the regional economy. Now compare that to a family driving down from Georgia for a couple of nights. That's still spending, sure, but it's not the same class of spending. International visitors stay longer, spend more, and sustain an entire layer of businesses that weekend trips simply can't keep alive at the same scale. Orlando built itself around a fire hose of spending. The weekend visitor is a garden hose. And when your entire system requires a fire hose, but you're living on garden hoses, the breakdown doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly. Margins get thinner, staffing gets tighter, expansions get delayed, and suddenly the machine that was designed to run at full speed starts running. Careful, what's tricky is that the parks didn't suddenly become bad. The rides didn't break. The weather didn't change. And yet the international share started shrinking. So what changed? The planning conversation changed. A family in Colombia or the Netherlands isn't just comparing ride lines anymore. They're running a full risk checklist. Visa frequent. Entry experience. Healthcare exposure. What happens if someone gets sick? What happens if we get pulled into extra screening? Do we actually feel relaxed doing this? And under all of it sits a harder to name factor. Whether the trip will feel smooth from the moment they land. A place can still be wonderful, and a country can still lose the feeling of ease. And when ease disappears, wonder stops being enough. Orlando is learning that in real time. Now Orlando is leisure. The next one is something deeper than leisure, because it's about relationships and identity. Miami. Miami International used to feel like the Western Hemisphere condensed into one building. Dozens of languages, reunion tears at arrivals, this buzzing sense of constant movement between the city and everywhere south of it. Latin America didn't just visit Miami. In a lot of ways, it adopted Miami. Families, students, business people, shoppers, people maintaining real lives across borders. This wasn't tourism the way people think of it. It was a rhythm. Miami was the door, and that rhythm is thinning. You see it in hotel vacancies in neighborhoods that didn't have vacancies. You see it in restaurants that were built around Brazilian, Argentine, Colombian customers operating at half their usual pace. You see it in high-end shopping districts reporting some of their softest numbers in memory. And what's important is that this isn't just Latin America ran out of money. That's not the story. The story is that a quiet question entered the booking conversation. A question people feel awkward saying out loud, but they're asking it anyway. Will we actually feel welcome there? Not processed, not tolerated. Welcome. And here's the brutal comparison. Cancun doesn't make you ask that. Lisbon doesn't. Plenty of destinations now make the arrival experience feel like an invitation, not an inspection. When a place is clear that it wants you there, you don't negotiate for your own comfort before you even pack. Miami isn't losing visitors because the city got worse. It's losing them because the feeling of arriving changed. What used to feel like coming home now feels, for too many people, like a test they didn't sign up to take. If you want a version of this that doesn't require any emotional interpretation at all, just look at the raw drop. Las Vegas. Harry Reid International. End of March. Numbers come out. International passenger volume down about 19.6% between January and February compared to the same period the year before. Domestic arrivals down too. A drop that close to 20% in a single month isn't a rounding error. It triggers emergency meetings inside airline route planning. It makes a city wonder if it still belongs in the same conversation as destinations it used to compete with without blinking. But Vegas has a problem that runs deeper than the data. Vegas was never selling a place. It was selling a feeling. People fly across oceans to sit at a card table because they've physically left their real life behind. Vegas only works when the visitor feels loose, comfortable, ready to let go. And when getting to Vegas becomes stressful, when fees appear before you've unpacked, when your final bill reads like you got ambushed at every turn, that feeling collapses. The visitor doesn't just overspend. They spend and feel taken. And a person who feels taken doesn't just skip Vegas next time. They often exit the entire category. Vegas used to sell spend big as a kind of freedom. Somehow it started feeling like a system designed to extract. And unlike cities with diverse economies, Vegas is almost nothing to fall back on. Strip, conventions, hospitality. When all three soften, there's no backstop. And once the cycle starts, it feeds itself. Fewer international visitors means airlines cut routes. Fewer routes mean remaining tickets get more expensive. Higher prices mean fewer people justify the trip. Hotels compress margins, casino floors soften, hours get trimmed. A city designed to run wide open doesn't cope well with anything less. Now, the next story has no dramatic collapse. It's just people who had no plan to stop coming, quietly stopping. Phoenix. For decades, the cold would hit Canada and the northern Midwest, and a specific kind of traveler would point themselves toward Phoenix. These weren't tourists. They were seasonal residents, snowbirds, Canadians who had made the same trip 15, sometimes 20 winters in a row. Same grocery store, same restaurant, first-name basis with the property manager. Phoenix wasn't a destination. It was the warm half of their year, and economically, snowbirds behave like residents. Monthly groceries, regular dinners out, doctor visits, home repairs, entertainment. A couple spending 4 months in Phoenix contributes to the economy in a way that could take 20 weekend tourists to match, and those 20 don't show up every year like clockwork. In 2026, the snowbirds aren't coming back at the same rate. No announcement, no trending headline. A couple from Saskatchewan looks at the numbers, thinks about border friction, senses the vibe has cooled, and makes a quiet decision. Portugal this year, the Caribbean, or just stay home and have an uncomplicated winter. One couple deciding is invisible. And here's the reality about loyalty. Nobody tells you it's fading until it's gone. You don't win back a 20-year habit with a promotion. A first-time visitor who had a rough experience, maybe you can repair that. A 20-year regular who decided it's not worth it anymore already processed the decision deeply, personally. Phoenix isn't just losing a season. It's losing a relationship. And relationships don't snap. They erode until the parking lot stops filling. A quieter version of that same erosion is happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul. The connection between the upper Midwest and Canada was never formal international tourism. It was like a neighborhood with a border cutting through it. Weekend shopping, family visits, business trips, routine cross-border movement that nobody thought about because it never required thought. Minneapolis was built into that rhythm. Steady, reliable infrastructure you only notice when it starts to thin. Airlines feel it first. When planes start showing up with empty seats, the response is fast and unemotional. Frequencies get cut. Aircraft get reassigned. A daily route becomes 3 times a week. Then it becomes a code share that technically keeps the line alive, but makes it inconvenient enough that people stop choosing it. And what that does to the local economy isn't shock. It's water through stone. Invisible day to day. But step back and you can see what the water did. Point 6 airports in 6 different stories, all pointing at one underlying shift. The next one moves beyond tourism into something that used to be called American influence. Washington Dulles. And just to be clear, this isn't about vacationers. This is diplomats, delegations, corporate executives, academics, journalists. People who move through the capital because a major world power naturally pulls them toward its center. That flow is thinning, and what drives it is different from anything we've talked about. A tourist skips Orlando because the trip feels complicated. A snowbird skips Phoenix because the welcome feels cooler. But when someone cancels a business trip to Washington, they're not thinking about resort fees. They're asking, is Washington still the right room for the conversation we need to have? When a major international conference that was held in Washington for 15 years quietly relocates to a European city, nobody issues a press release. But the hotel feels it. The catering company feels it. The restaurants feel it. And the relationships that would have formed, introductions becoming partnerships, conversations becoming collaboration, those just never happen. Small loss each time, enormous in aggregate. Business travel is sensitive to what Washington projects. Stability, predictability, the sense that coming here to do serious work is smooth and reasonable. If companies are already dealing with policy uncertainty and tariff headaches, they don't jump at adding more friction by routing important meetings through a capital that feels harder to read. And for people who move money and talent across borders for a living, harder to read is just another way of saying, I'll go somewhere else. Now take that idea, America as a promise, and look at Los Angeles. LA was never just a city. It was a global advertisement. Movies and television sold California's sunshine and possibility to billions of people who had never been. For many, Louisiana was the first place they ever wanted to go in America. But there's a weakness baked into cities that run on image. If reality drifts too far from the picture, the gap becomes the story. Someone from Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe who grew up watching that LA arrives in 2026 and encounters something complicated. High costs by global standards. Fees, add-ons, the fear of getting sick without coverage, a constant feeling of friction. And for a city built on the dream, friction is deadly. People didn't fly to LA for the geography. They flew for the feeling that America was easy, open, excited to have them. When entry experience, costs, and small stresses communicate something else, the dream doesn't just disappoint. It makes people update their entire picture. And once someone updates their picture of LA and redirects to Tokyo or Dubai or Barcelona, they rarely circle back. They've replaced the dream with a new one. Now, Chicago O'Hare is different from everything we've talked about, and in some ways it's the most structurally serious because O'Hare was never mainly about Chicago. It was about the network. O'Hare was one of the major junction boxes through which global aviation moved. Not because people wanted to spend time in Illinois, but because route maps were built with American hubs at the center. Frankfurt to Denver through Chicago. Seoul to Dallas through Chicago. Its power came from being indispensable, and indispensability can disappear fast when a map gets redrawn. When international passenger volume to America softens, airlines don't hold empty seats out of loyalty. They restructure. They route through Toronto, Amsterdam, Dubai, wherever demand is flowing. Losing hub status isn't like losing tourists. A tourist city can improve experience and win people back. A hub losing its network position loses something that compounds against itself. Once routes shift and partnerships reorganize around a new layout, the map sets into a new shape. Getting back into that shape requires far more than a discount. It requires demand at scale. Around O'Hare, that impact is absorbed quietly. Fewer flights, less cargo, shorter shifts, smaller lease renewals. Infrastructure built for assumptions that no longer hold, slowly hollowing out without a single dramatic headline. Now the last two are where the implications reach beyond terminals into the future of how the world does business. San Francisco. SFO was never primarily a tourist gateway. The most economically meaningful traffic through it wasn't people coming to see the Bay. It was the wiring of the global innovation economy. Engineers, founders, investors, researchers. People who weren't visiting Silicon Valley like a landmark. They were coming because it was where the future was being built. This category of visitor doesn't just fill hotel rooms. They bring investment capital, ideas, partnerships, and relationships that generate economic activity for years. Losing them operates at a different level than losing leisure travelers. And yet arrivals from parts of Southeast Asia have dropped by numbers that are hard to even sit with. That's not a slow season. That's a reroute. What drives that reroute isn't they got bored of America. It's risk. Multiple governments have issued formal advisories describing the U.S. entry process as unpredictable. Stories about detentions and inconsistent screening spread through professional circles fast, through founder chats, investor networks, research communities, where a single bad border story can change how an entire cohort makes decisions. When a founder in Jakarta is choosing where to meet investors, Singapore doesn't carry that risk. Tokyo doesn't. Dubai doesn't. Those cities have engineered a consistent arrival message. You are welcome. Your time is respected. Come back. America is currently sending something less consistent. And in a global competition for the most mobile, most valuable people on Earth, inconsistency is a cost. San Francisco's question in 2026 isn't, is tourism down? It's whether America is still the automatic first choice for the people building what comes next, or whether that default has quietly moved elsewhere. And that brings us to Newark, the New York gateway for millions of international travelers, especially price-sensitive ones. New York feels like it should be untouchable, too big, too embedded in global culture to ever be seriously threatened by a shift in travel patterns. But Newark is showing the same directional thinning because reputation alone has stopped being enough to make the math work, that a family from Tokyo pricing New York now places it beside Paris, Lisbon, Bangkok, Mexico City, cities with real culture, strong infrastructure, and dramatically lower costs. New York makes you pay for everything: hotels, food, transport, tickets, the constant accumulation of small costs that don't feel small by the end. And when you can't afford the version of New York that makes the trip worth it, the restaurants, the shows, the experiences, you don't get a cheaper New York. You get a more exhausting one. The city is still iconic, but the accessible version of it is shrinking for the global middle-class travel market. And underneath the money, there's another friction: the expectation that travel should feel relaxed from arrival to departure. Not perfect, not no rules, just not on edge. The moment travelers start factoring that in and find destinations where the trip feels simpler, New York becomes optional in a way it never used to be. Yes, oh, here's the full picture. 10 airports, 10 different stories, but one shared pattern.